Hello everyone and welcome to another of these image review sessions. I'm sorry I've not done one for a while, but that's mainly because I've been away shooting, and then I've also been busy with school summer holidays. So it's nice to have a few images to show. All the images I think in this session are from my recent Red Sea trip back in June and the beginning of July in 2022. And these pictures are kind of very much a first pull out of images that I've chosen to process. Quite a lot of them have diver pictures in because actually I chose to process those for our end of week slideshows on the boat. So that's why there's quite a lot of pictures with divers in. And then I've also needed to process a few pictures for a couple of magazine articles. The Amphius one you can see on the screen here was processed for a column in Scuba Diver magazine, and then there's quite a lot of photos from a apprentice feature I did for Photo magazine, and then quite a lot of wreck pictures for another article, and a few reef pictures. So it's a little bit of an eclectic mix. And actually, there's already more than 50 pictures processed from that trip, yet I still haven't pulled my favourites out. So I probably should have prioritised a few more favourites, having gone through the process of processing 50 pictures. So without further ado, with 50 pictures to go through, it's going to be a fairly speedy slideshow this time. Oh, what I didn't tell you is on the right hand side, if you're viewing this at full HD on YouTube and put it at full screen playback, you should be able to read the camera settings. So this lionfish picture and the lens settings and that sort of thing that I've used, the camera, the lens and all the camera settings for the photo. That said, all these pictures are also on my website now, so you can always search under, or if you're watching this relatively soon after I recorded it, under latest images, or alternatively search for Red Sea, and you'll find these pictures in the same order that they are here, because they're in chronological order here, and they'll be in chronological order on my website. So you would be able to then use my website to look up the camera settings should you want to. Okay, so this first picture is on the Dun Raven. The Dun Raven is a wreck in the Red Sea that lies upside down. It looks a little bit like a bathtub lying against the reef because it's the underside of the wreck. But within that bathtub, there is always quite interesting light and plenty of life. And it's a classic spot for getting nice schools of glassfish, like these golden sweepers here. And these particular group have a large sort of family of lionfish that hang out there, often I think 15, 18 lionfish that feed on this group of sweepers. And so that's always a nice highlight of the dive. The problem of it as a photo trip is that there's one school of glassfish and there's lots of lionfish around, which are a bit of a stinging risk if people are not being careful. So it can get a bit congested in there. On this particular day, I waited to be the very, very last person in there. So actually, I was very impressed that my group had done such a good job of keeping the visibility good inside there, because usually when you have lots of photographers in a small inside of a wreck, things can get stirred up a little bit. But actually, the conditions were still quite nice. But there wasn't particularly good lionfish action on this day. This is the only shot I've chosen to process. It's not an amazing shot, but I quite like this because the lionfish was swimming upside down on the ceiling. And I like the fact that lionfish is upside down, but the sweepers are the right way up in this picture. This is another thing that I always enjoy doing in the Red Sea is diving around dusk in the summer months, because there's always so much fish activity going on. And this is a pair of yellow boxfish spawning or courting. And the males of this, they tend to chase the females around. The male is the foreground one with the blue spots. They often look a bit bluer underwater, and the yellow females can look a bit more yellowy underwater. But here in this picture, actually, they both look quite a similar colour. I think maybe when they're mating, maybe their colours change a little bit. And the males tend to harass the females quite a lot, and actually kiss them with those lips all over their body. And this is a photo of a male and a female courting. They tend to court for quite a long time, so they're quite an easy species to get these types of shots for. They also the males get so sort of full of hormones that they'll fall in love with anything. And I've got photos of me with the boxfish trying to sort of kiss my face mask, either seeing the reflection or just maybe I was just too good looking. I don't know. Let's see if I move on. On to the Thistlegorm. We on the first week of my Red Sea workshop, actually one of the group had an accident on the Thistlegorm and got their finger stuck between two ropes, which are used by different dive boats to tie to the wreck, and was quite badly hurt. So we had to actually return directly to port after this dive to treat that injury. So we only did one dive on Thistlegorm during the first week of the workshop, and I just visited a few of my favourite spots just to see. I always like to sort of do a typical route around, take quick snaps of a few of my favourite subjects, see how they've changed since my last visit to the Thistlegorm, which was actually a long time ago because it was it was sort of pre 2000 and it was in 2019. So it was interesting to return and see some of these sites after 2 years or more, 3 years away from them. So this was just one of the classic motorbikes, BSA M20 motorbike on the upper deck port side of the wreck in hold number 2, at the forward end of hold number 2. And this particular motorbike is well positioned. It's actually on the back of a truck, which is what lifts it up above the debris, as all the motorbikes are, and that creates a good picture. This motorbike is good to photograph because it's shallow, and it's got a nice background with that blue water on one side. And if you're going to photograph any motorbike on the Thistlegorm, this should always be your first target to shoot. We call this one Ellie's motorbike on the workshops because a very old photo of mine has a picture of my wife with it, and so we sort of nicknamed the motorbike after her just to differentiate it from all the other BSA M20 motorbikes on Thistlegorm. This is later that same day, actually relating to that accident. After we'd returned to port and we had to dive near Sharm el Sheikh, we visited Ras Am Sid, and these are the big sea fans that sit on the edge of the reef there at Ras Am Sid. It's always a very impressive scene with these great big sea fans on the wall there, and this is Jenny swimming over the top modelling in this picture. With these sea fans, I decided to take this really expansive shot of them, really because the individual sea fans at Ras Am Sid are nice, but they're actually probably a little bit big almost to shoot individually. So and they can be a little bit tatty in places. So actually, the wider shot I think appealed to me more on this occasion. Next up is this image here. I'm just going to make them a little bit bigger so you can see the settings again. This picture here, so another picture of Jenny here with a school of batfish. This is very much a process really for the end of week slideshow with just showing her in with the batfish. But I actually think it's quite a nice magazine-y type shot because it's got a real interaction. There's a real relationship between it kind of feels a bit unposed, and there's a real relationship between the diver and the school of batfish. Next up, this is just a soft coral at Ras Mohammed that's under the overhang. It's in about 4 or 5 meters of water. So it's a nice, easy one to do. It's kind of end of dive type shot. You've done a nice dive shooting different things, and you can go and just shoot this nice soft coral, and it's always got nice amphias, and because it's under the overhang, it's often extended like this. So a nice thing to shoot. And then on to dusk dive. That day, and this is a photo of a male amphias photographed with an open aperture against the setting sun. So the bokeh patterns behind are created by focusing on the amphias, and then the surface of the sea is then out of focus, and the sunlight playing on that surface of the sea creates these interesting bokeh patterns when you open the aperture up. I think this was shot probably about f4, f5, yeah, there we go, f5, 1,000th of a second, and making use of Retra's high-speed flash sync capability so that I can shoot at 1,000th of a second and have flash in my pictures. And the reason I needed to shoot on such a high shutter speed is because I'm shooting into the sun with an open aperture, and I need to open that aperture to get the bokeh effect, and as a result a normal shutter speed would just overexpose the background, so the high speed sync is well suited to this type of picture. This is just a big cowtail ray just sitting on the seabed at Ras Mohammed. They're normally quite flighty, but this particular one I spent just a couple of minutes, not really that long, but I just spent a bit of time slowly approaching it. And because I kind of took my time approaching it, it was super chilled out. And actually, when we were talking about it after the dive on the boat, some of the other guys on the boat said they'd seen it earlier in the dive and it had run away from them. So I think my slow approach paid dividends, and I was able to get just nice classic shot of this species just on the reef there. Not an amazing photo really, but a species that I don't often photograph. There you go, a picture of me. We don't need to dwell on that. It's just a useful selfie type shot just to show me underwater on the trip. Another photo of Jenny here coming along the reef wall. There was this nice roving grouper being cleaned in this kind of overhang of the reef with all the Scleronepthia soft corals around it. And the problem is that I could see that grouper from where I was, but Jenny, who was modelling in the blue, couldn't see the grouper and didn't know it was there. And I was trying, and it was difficult, and the grouper was only going to stay there for a couple of seconds. So yes, her eye line, if she'd been looking the right way, even though she couldn't physically see the grouper from where she was, you would have, looking at the photo, wouldn't have known that. But unfortunately I couldn't get her eye line just right, so she's looking above the grouper here rather than at it. These are some just classic Red Sea sort of scenery. I love the Red Sea scenery with the soft corals, the fire corals. They just have such a lovely colour palette, and then mixed in with just the explosion of Anthias. And particularly when the current's running, it can be hard to take these photos, but the Anthias stay very neat, and you're able to get really nice images. I like there's a nice hawkfish sitting in the corals here, just chilling out down the back there. Right, let's have a look. These are some more diver shots. This is Lauren here, just swimming past a very colourful, shallow Red Sea reef. I always just, if you haven't been to the Red Sea for a while, when you get there, you can't resist shooting more and more and more of these Anthias, and just these incredibly colourful reefs, incredibly vibrant, incredibly full of life. And just persuaded Lauren to swim into the shot here to get a photo of a photographer stalking the scene. And this is the same scene, but now with a photo with Jenny. And these pictures were both taken on the same dive. I took one of Lauren for the slideshow, to have a picture for her, and then I took one of Jenny as well. Later on the same dive, visiting another of the nice pinnacles at Ras Mohammed. This pinnacle's around the back of Yolanda Reef. The previous one was on the front face on the face of Yolanda that faces towards Shark Reef, and this is around the back of Yolanda. It's kind of between Yolanda Reef and the satellite reef. And this pinnacle is very pretty, and it's one I photograph a lot because actually it's got lots of faces. It's very small. This is kind of the bottom end of it, and the bottom end is covered with these lovely pinky purpley soft corals. It's got tons of Anthias on, and the top part is all fire coral. So this same little bommy offers really different shots. And then the fact that when the current runs one way, all the fish and colour is at one end of it. When the current runs the other way, they all face the other way. And then as the light moves during the day, it gives a lot of options for one tiny little bommy to shoot. And this is just a shot of the bommy with the Anthias, with the soft corals, with Jenny posing. And then luckily these orange dot trevally, which you can see in the background here just behind Jenny. Let's see if I can zoom in on them. They kind of came swimming through while we were doing this shot, so I was able to get them into the picture as well, which I think just adds a little bit more depth and interest in the shot. Right, let's keep going. This is another picture of Lauren swimming past some soft corals. This was her 200th dive, so she wanted me to take some pictures of her on the dive. And that's why she was wearing her purple wetsuit skin as well in the photos, and so I took these pictures to celebrate her 200th dive. I was also with Lauren when she did her 100th dive, so I think I had no excuse not to take some more pictures of her on her next milestone dive. Then the evening after that, these pictures are taken of Anthias spawning. I love photographing Anthias in the evening. They tend to spawn heavily every night in the Red Sea just around sunset, and you get a lot of behaviours, a lot of males showing off behaviour, and then this is actually the moment of spawning, which happens very fast. You can see how much movement there is in the male fish here. You can see his tail is is blurred because of the movement. His pectoral fins are out, and he's yawning at the point of spawning here as the female goes against him. He's kind of actually, the female was a little bit more stationary, or she was moving, but they were both swimming up, and the male is ducked down underneath her and is yawning as they spawn. And then this is a little bit of sort of just a spawning rise, but just prior to spawning. And actually this particular male Antheus had attracted 3 females in one go, which I'd never seen before. So that was quite cool to see, with the 3 females crowding around the male. Okay, and those pictures are actually taken at Abu Nuhas, at the channel on the far, it's kind of as on the protected side, but as far round to the north east as you can get before you get out of the protection. And the reef there is actually, it's only shallow, but it's very nice, very rich, nice visibility, and it's a good spot for an evening sunset dive if you're over that way. On to the wrecks. Then this is the Chrysula K, the well-known engine room. This is the favourite spot for doing remote strobe photos, but this is just a standard lit shot with Jenny looking at the pillar drill. This is down into the engine room, which is a sort of dark and quite a silty spot, but always but if we've got interesting with lots of kind of very industrial feeling shapes and textures in there. I think it's quite an interesting place to shoot. It's super dark. This is a long exposure. It's got a fair amount of ghosting in the image, both in the background and where Jenny's torch is in the foreground. But in this particular case, I like that. I normally obviously wouldn't want the pictures to have blur in. I didn't really intend in the photo, but I think in this case here it helps capture the atmosphere of this dark engine room, and it shows how dark it is. Sometimes if you photograph a very dark place very brightly, with everything super sharp, you don't give that impression of it being dark. So I think this is a rare occasion where I quite like that blur. This is up in the bridge or accommodation area of the Chrysula K wreck. I just like this view through the superstructure with all the Antheus. There's lots of layers and depth in this picture. It doesn't really have a strong foreground subject, but it's kind of frame upon frame upon frame that I like in the picture. I don't think it's a picture that works well small, but when it's big, it's nice to see. Just bring the settings up. That was a 1/6 of a second, the one of Jenny inside, and this one is back up. These are all shot with the fisheye. This picture here is a multi-image panorama. I quite often do these mini 2 or 3 frame panoramas when I can't quite get the scene that I want in the frame in one shot. So I'll just do click, 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 or click, click, and just do a couple of pictures to make sure I get everything in. Taken, fractions of a second apart, and then they stitch really nicely together. And allows me to capture just a slightly bigger scene than it would be possible to get in. The reason I couldn't just back away and get a bit more in here is there's obviously a wall behind me where I was taking this picture, behind this cooker. Right, then just some shots of the stern of the ship. Typically you would dive this wreck by going to the stern, which is the deepest part of the wreck, first, and then working your way up to the shallower end. But because I was keen to stay out of the way of everyone else during the who were shooting for the workshop, we kind of did our profile the other way around. We started off in the shallower areas, and then as it got quieter down at the stern, went down to the stern to do some shots around the stern, looking down onto the stern, capturing colour and shadow on the subject to create quite a 3-dimensional feel from the stern end of this large cargo ship. Then next dive, moving over to the Janice D, doing that classic Janice D stern image, picture I've taken many times down the years, but always nice to add another one to the collection, and then just doing a horizontal variation of that. At this time of day, this was taken sort of late morning. It's very nice for the beams inside the wreck. This particular angle I think is better in the afternoon. This shot is better at this time, at this late morning time, when the light's really capturing the side of the hull. But this shot, this particular composition, the horizontal shot here, probably would be better on an afternoon dive. And then just dropping down to the seabed and working the black and white angle up against the wreck. It's really the shadows that you get by shooting on this angle and the bright surface that I think makes this composition really work nicely. Back to the reefs. This is Jenny's stock. This time Jenny modelling in Lauren's wetsuit with her camera on the wall at Ras Mohammed, just these types of shots, they look very simple, but they're actually very hard to do, because you've got so many moving parts. You've not only got a diver who you're trying to pose correctly, get the timing right, not have them breathing bubbles out all over their face, having them not too close or not too far away so they don't end up too small or too big, which with a wide angle lens, a very small change in distance makes a massive difference. Waiting to get their eye line right, and then particularly when you're working with Amphius, also then trying to time the shot so you've got neatly arranged Amphius in the picture as well. And so they're quite fun pictures to take these, because although they're a simple photo, actually getting all those details right is actually very, very challenging. And this is a picture of Valerie here, taken at that same bombing I was talking about a few minutes ago, at Ras Mohammed. And this is a picture that that was for the feature in Photo magazine, in the Apprentice feature. And this is actually used as the opening double page spread for that in the magazine. A bicolour parrotfish. Those of you who've watched these videos before know of my love of parrotfish and how I feel they're underappreciated. And bicolour parrotfish are absolutely, the super males, the males, are absolutely beautiful fish. And I think this picture is a real celebration of just those extraordinary colours. We're now into the week 2 of the workshops, and this is back to the Janice D, shooting against the light again, just a little bit further away. I think actually these black and white shots, because you can boost the contrast, I sometimes fall into the trap of getting a bit too close to the wreck when I'm doing these black and whites, and this one I've just backed away just a little bit further, just to give it a little bit more space into the composition. This is inside the Janice D, inside the engine room, looking up towards the skylight in the engine room, and there's always these schools of sweepers in there, and it's very nice to try to get those into the composition with the sweepers, and then that skylight above them, and you can get them circling round and swirling round. One thing I saw on this workshop is actually it was actually Jenny, who we saw a few pictures ago in the purple wetsuit. She had the idea of doing some of these as a black and white, and I'd never seen anyone do kind of these flashlit inside a wreck shots as black and white before, and I thought that worked really, really well. It just, there's not really, the colours in this shot are that important to it, and actually the black and white really gave a lot of extra impact. It didn't matter if the through the water through the skylight was a bit overexposed, and also again with the fish, so you just end up with kind of black with the cross at the top and then the school of fish, and they do look really nice in black and white. I've not processed any of mine that way yet, but I certainly intend to. Okay, this is another picture shot for the End Photo article of Valerie photographing the Janice D. This is back inside the engine room of the Chrysula K. A stitched panorama. Unfortunately, my panorama here didn't stitch properly, and I need to put it into some software that stitches better than Lightroom. Lightroom struggled a bit with the stitching towards the edges of this frame, so I've ended up with kind of the central section, but not the edges of my intended composition. But I think I might be able to get it to stitch a little bit better. Also, I don't like this big shadow here being cast by my lower strobe on this piece of equipment here. I'm creating this shadow where you can see my mouse moving there. I don't know how well it comes through in the video. But yeah, that's a bit of a disappointment. So I think next time I try that, I'll remember to move my strobes up above to give a slightly more top lighty feel. The stern section of the Chrysula K, again, with really nice colour coming through on the wreck. Really nice blue in the background. Black and white angle on the Chrysula K stern. I've always loved the mast of the Chrysula K with the cross. I'm also pleased to say that rope there was for a long time some dive boat had tied a rope to this davit, which was obviously a lifeboat davit from the original ship, right in the foreground of this picture, and the rope would hang down and it had a loop on the end and looked like a hangman's noose, and it was been tied there so someone could tie a dive boat to it, but tying a dive boat to such a weak part of the wreck would have clearly broken the wreck. So having tied the rope there, no one's ever tied onto it, and the rope just has been hanging there for ages, so I was very pleased to see it gone by the time I took this picture. Inside the tile wreck, the Chrysula K, all the tiles packed up inside, just available light here, just really capturing the atmosphere. You can put strobe on these pictures, but I think you get a much nicer atmosphere without it. And the Crassula K now, a big section of the stern has has fallen away, which is what's creating that blue window at the back of this, where that section of hull has fallen away. And this is a photo on the outside. Actually, during the first week of the workshop, Lauren, who was pictured in one of the pictures, she'd done one of these panoramas showing this, and this is kind of my version of her shot, I guess. I just thought it was her picture was a really great way of showing how this side of the wreck has just fallen open, and just really to communicate that fact. And it was just, I think, just the wider view of the panoramic image, I think, makes that very clear what's going on. And then this is the bow of the wreck with Neil swimming in this one. I think Neil's cylinder's getting a bit empty there. Looks like the end of the dive. You see his cylinders floating up at the back, which with an aluminium cylinder is always a good sign that you're getting pretty low on air. But he's only a couple of meters deep, so that was just the end of the dive. And then back to the Thistlegorm. This is the Thistlegorm, just a view down onto the bow with ropes tied onto the wreck as guide ropes for divers coming down from different dive boats. This is inside the holds. I always feel like, the Thistlegorm lends itself to horizontal shots, so I'm always trying to take a few verticals when I'm there. Certainly when you do an article on the Thistlegorm, you can't just publish an article in a magazine with horizontal pictures, so it's always good to have a few nice vertical pictures to mix in. So these are Norton motorbikes in the back of a Fordson Watt 3 truck in the lower level of the hold. This is on the starboard side. This is a BSA motorbike shot with backlighting on it. And then off the wreck and onto the reefs again. This is at Small Crack, a site we don't often do on the workshops, but it's got really nice sea fans there. And these orchid dotty backs are very common fish in the Red Sea, but particularly around sea fans you get the chance to shoot them on nice backgrounds. And so this is a shallow depth of field shot, high magnification picture taken of one just in front of that nice sea fan to give that good colour behind the subject. An Amphius sunset shot again, very similar to the previous one, done with high-speed flash sync. I'll just bring up the settings on this one. So this is at an 800th of a second, ISO 64, and it's f2.8, shot with a Trioplan lens, which is a manual focus lens, and the lens doesn't communicate properly with the camera. That's why it had a dash on the aperture. But I always dive with this lens set at f2.8, so I know it's f2.8. But the Trioplan lens creates really interesting bokeh effects, and in this case here has created these nice bubble-like bokeh behind the Amphius. These are just some shots from the article, which I needed. Don't need to see those big. Split level at Shark Observatory, taken at the end of one of the nice dives at Shark Observatory in Ras Mohammed National Park. This is just the reef edge, and then behind the what part of the escarpment, the cliffs of Shark Observatory, kind of a very obvious landmark in Ras Mohammed National Park. Another picture of Valerie for the magazine, and another picture of Valerie in action photographing schooling snappers off Ras Mohammed at Shark Reef. More of my parrotfish love. This is a roundhead parrotfish. I can't remember the Latin name. Is it Chloris? I can't find the thing. So I'm going to just bring up this so you can see. Chloris gibbous, a steephead parrotfish. I've called it here, Red Sea. See, anyway, just parrotfish just have these fantastic colours. We always ignore them as photographers. They're not cooperative subjects, but I always like to shoot them. And then I think the last shot is a photo of Valerie. Just on this reef pinnacle with all these Red Sea raccoon butterfly fish. Just another setup shot for the magazine, just to get some photos of her in action as an underwater photographer. So hopefully you enjoyed that first selection of images from the Red Sea. As I explained at the beginning, a lot of these were chosen because I needed to process them for other reasons. And actually I was going to this week actually go through that Red Sea trip and pull out all my favourite images. Some of these are favourite images, I'm not pretending they're not, but I look forward to finding out a few more pictures. Probably a few less diver shots coming up in the next batch. Okay, thanks for tuning in, and I'll be back with another one of these again soon.